So I wanted to make a video with an alternative to the Datafrog SF2000, and this is what I've came up with. This is the Trimui Model S, and you can now pick these up on Aliexpress for about the same price as an SF2000. In fact, sometimes cheaper. And it's pretty decent. This is a 32 gig model, although I've taken out that card and I have a 64 gig card in it. It charges up via USB-C, and the SD card goes in there. And I've installed Trimui on it, which makes a huge difference. Now, the only disadvantage of MinUI on the Trimui Model S is you don't get the arcade emulation that you would normally get. But you do get lots of other great features. So, I mean, this thing it's absolutely tiny. Let's see if I can get something to compare it with. Something else equally small. Here we go. Here's my equally tiny Anbernic RG Nano. And I love playing on this thing. I mean, it's absolute totsy. But look at this. It's not hugely bigger. I mean, it is bigger. It'll take up more space in your pocket. That goes without saying. But screen-wise, it's got a bigger screen. And it works really well. So let's see if I can get this. There's a key combination here you have to push to get it out of sleep mode. Can't remember what it is. There you go, that's what it is. It's the bumper buttons and any face button. So it's got a lot of good features that, say, the SF2000 doesn't have. So, I mean, the SF2000, what advantages does it have? It's a little bit more ergonomic. It's got a bigger screen. It has a removable battery. This thing doesn't have a removable battery. It has a kind of version of a custom firmware, although it's not. The Trimui Model S, which can be purchased for about the same money now, has USB-C charging, which is good. It's got a decent built-in battery. It has a sleep mode, which the SF2000 definitely doesn't have. It has volume controls that you adjust by pressing one of these buttons. You know, I think it's the select button and the bumper buttons to, there you go, change the volume up and down, which works really well. If you push the start button and the bumper buttons, you can turn the brightness down to reasonably low. A lot lower than you get on the SF2000, which has no adjustment for brightness. I like to run this quite bright, to be honest. But we'll do it a little bit lower just because it looks better on the camera. It has quite slimline buttons, but they actually activate pretty well. They're quite clicky. And, oops, I've just accidentally loaded a game there. Performance-wise, it's slightly better than SF2000. I mean, it certainly manages games like Yoshi's Island a little bit better. There's none of that horrible screen tearing that you see. Let's see if I can get this to focus in and we can see what sort of FPS it's running at here. It's not going to run brilliant because, as we know, the Super Nintendo had a special chip to run some of these old games, so it will run less than the full 60 FPS, but way better than the SF2000 runs. And it actually runs, you know, pretty well, I have to say. Looks good too. Look at that little screen if I can just get it to focus properly. And stop my camera from shaking. But I have to say, I'm actually pretty impressed with this. This slips in a pocket, no problem. Now, the only disadvantage is, and you can see it's actually pretty good nick still, it has a single piece plastic front panel, which will scratch up over time, I'm certain of. And if you've got one of these little sock thingies that used to keep iPods in, it'll look after that perfectly well. Fits inside that just perfectly. So if I chuck that in my pocket, it's good when I'm out and about. And in fact, I'm finding I'm using that more than I'm using my RG Nano right now. Just because it's so much more pocketable. And it's just as convenient for charging. So Aliexpress right now, you can pick these up. I got this a few weeks ago actually, whilst looking for an alternative to the SF2000. Since that was first put to me probably 6 months ago that there was no better alternatives, I've been trying my best to find a better alternative, and I think this is as close as I can get. Now I'm currently playing this on the actual viewfinder of my mobile phone, so it's not ideal. But as you can see, it's still not great FPS. Get this to zoom in properly. You know, we're like mid-20s. Now, what you can do is you can press one of these buttons, I think, that one. And you can go and you can make a few adjustments, but not so much. You can turn the FPS on, you can remap the inputs, and that's mostly about it. This one here, I think, is the yeah, that's the Game Boy Advance version, which runs full speed. Again, you can run the Game Boy Advance version on the SF2000. It doesn't run at full speed then either. So this is much, much, much more playable. And I've been using this to play some old Game Boy Color games. Wario Land 2, for example. Completed that just recently on FPGA, and started playing it on this again because I forgot how much I enjoyed that game. But as you can see, 60 FPS when you run the Game Boy Advance games, which is pretty decent, especially on something that you can pick up for barely over £10 right now. Yeah, we know that Super Famicom games don't run particularly well on the SF2000, but let's just see how Game Boy Advance games run on the SF2000. Especially with the updated emulator that it comes with. What can I say? This thing's just brilliant. I kind of wanted one of these when I first saw them, more as a gadget and a gimmick, you know, much like the RG Nano. I mean, it's just a fun, silly little thing, but it plays pretty well. I mean, it's not a serious handheld. It's the sort of thing you can throw in your pocket and, you know, forget it's there, and then if you ever wanted a little gaming session, it's good enough. Much like this is good enough. You know, you can throw this in a bag. If it gets broken, it's not the end of the world. When this first came out, if you threw it away and broke it, it would be the end of the world because it was kind of pricey. But now, I believe Powkiddy are making these as well now. I don't know if it's just under license. I mean, I've just bought this one and it's still branded a Trimui Model S. I don't know if this has been made by Powkiddy. Presumably not. But because they're now being made by Powkiddy, they're absolutely worthless. So you can pick these up really cheaply. So let's have a look at this. Let's go down to Game Boy Advanced. There we go. So obviously still got that strange screen turn at the top. It doesn't really matter. Any powerful games on this give you that issue, but again, that's looking pretty promising at that point. But as soon as you start playing the game, you'll see the FPS start to drop. That runs at a absolutely locked 60 FPS. This is struggling to even do 10 FPS at the loading screen. Now, what I can't say is if this has got any frame skip on it, because there is no option to change frame skip. If we go into options, oh, that's not true. The Game Boy Advance, you can turn frame skip on and off, and it's currently switched off on this. So on this, frame skip will be turned on, and as you'll soon see, even in the cutscenes it can't manage usable FPS. And I keep getting told this is perfectly acceptable because it's a weak processor. This has got a weak processor and it's more than capable of playing Game Boy Advance games at 60 FPS. It does a really good job, in fact. This is just a disaster. So if you've got 10 to 15 bucks and you want to buy something and this is on your list, do a bit of searching. Maybe take a week or two, you'll probably pick one of these up for the same price. It's definitely worth hunting around and waiting for the bargains. Definitely worth it. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's got a drop pixel there, but it's actually just muck under the screen, unfortunately. Now, it's not a OCA laminated screen, but then there's that. So, yeah, depending on what you do with it, you just have to look after it a bit and make sure it doesn't get too dirty. It's been in my pocket, so it's had plenty of use this last few weeks. Okay, let's look at this. I'll turn the volume down on this just now. Look at that. That's terrible. I mean, listen to the audio. Look at that. Barely double-digit FPS. Apparently, people are saying this is acceptable. I don't think this is acceptable. Not when for the same money, you can pick this up and actually have 60 FPS. And while this might be a little bit more ergonomic, who cares if it's ergonomic if it's unplayable? This might be a bit less ergonomic, but it's perfectly playable. I mean, I might not be very good at this game, but it's perfectly playable. Whoops. So, if you're looking for a cheap handheld to play Game Boy Advance games, maybe not so much Super Nintendo or Super Famicom games, but certainly Game Boy Advance games, Game Boy, that kind of thing. What can this do in its current list? Well, it can do Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Game Gear, Sega Genesis, Atari Lynx, which plays pretty well, Master System, Neo Geo Pocket, some PlayStation games, Pokemon Mini, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx 16, and some WonderSwan. And that's about it. But it doesn't try to do more than it can actually do. Okay, Super Nintendo's not brilliant on it, but it's still better than you're going to get from this thing. So, that's my recommendation. If you're on the market for an SF2000, don't buy that. Buy this instead, the Trimui Model S. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.